Hi, my name is Niina, and you're listening Together Through the Storms podcast. Welcome to the journey with me. I would like to begin by acknowledging traditional owners of the land where I'm recording this episode today, which is the Wurrung country. I would like to pay my respects to the elders past and present, and to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who may be listening today. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Together Through the Storms podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Today's episode is going to look a little bit different. I will be asking some questions from myself, and those questions will be the same ones as I will be then asking from my future guests, families who have children with additional needs or disabilities. Some of the questions can feel a little bit intimidating, and I feel like this is a good way for me to get some perspective before asking those questions from my beautiful guests. So if you're ready, let's jump into the episode. Time to start with our quote. This time the quote is unknown, something that I just came across on Instagram, but it goes like this. I wouldn't change you for the world, but I would change the world for you. I think any parent that has children or child with additional needs feel this pain. They just want our children to fit in, feel like they have a place in this world. And that's what we're all working together towards. First question that I ask my guests is an icebreaker question around self-care routines and what's the most important self-care for my special guests. And today I'm going to answer that question myself. I feel like over the years, self-care has become so essential to me, and I definitely learned it the hard way. So there was a time when I didn't prioritize self-care, and I just realized that I simply can't pour from an empty cup. So I feel like it's super important, especially when our children have such high needs and we're constantly alert. It's very intensive. So I feel like it's even more important that you have that time to really recharge, just so that you can be better carer as well. My probably number one favorite self-care routine at the moment is my weekly yoga class. There's just something really magical in that whole experience. Like from the moment when I walk into the studio, I can smell different things, I can feel different things, the floor make different sounds. It's like the whole experience for me. I just feel like that's the place where I can best connect with myself, and that's why it's so essential. I've also discovered reading over the last couple of years probably, but I've noticed that the more I have thoughts running through my head, the harder it is for me to concentrate on a book. But sometimes that's also a good thing because the book can really distract you from those thoughts. So I would say two of my essential self-care routines are my yoga classes and reading. But in a way, my motto and my mindset is that I try to do every day something that I love, whether it's just for a few minutes, whether it's longer period of time. I try to make every day something magical happening for myself, whether it's a walk outside, reading a book for 10 minutes, doing a meditation, so that I always have like something to look forward to the next day as well, where I know I can recharge. And one more thing I want to say around self-care, what I've learned personally is that it's not so much about what I do, and often it's not so much about how long I do certain activities for. So it doesn't mean I have to meditate for an hour and a half or go to a super long yoga class or anything like that. Sometimes it can be 5 minutes, but the importance is that it's consistent, that it happens regularly, whether it's every day or every week. But I feel like the anticipation is part of the joy, because I know that self-care time is coming. So I would say those are my biggest learnings around self-care. The next question I ask from my guests, which can be also a little bit intimidating, is the darkest time during my journey and what got me through it. When I was trying to think a response to this question, I was going through a lot of memories from early years of being a parent for children with additional needs. It's hard to really choose in a way because looking back, they kind of all blend in together. It's hard to draw a line where one dark time ends and another one starts. But I guess I could sort of describe it as both of my girls, as I mentioned, are deaf and they both wear cochlear implants. And I don't know if you know much about cochlear implants, but the process is very complex and requires a surgery. And the surgery is not always guaranteed to be successful. And in our case, we had extremely bad luck with the surgeries, and we just had to go through the surgeries again and again and again. And it's hard to explain the process, but it also involves a lot of appointments. And for us, it means traveling an hour and a half each way to the hospital where they monitor the process. It means that there has to be an isolation period before the surgeries to ensure that the child would be as well as possible for the surgery. But even if you do that perfectly, like we tried, it still doesn't guarantee that the child is actually well and there's no fluid in the ear. So we tried to do everything by the books that we possibly could, but yet we were constantly facing a situation where the child was unwell or there was fluid in the ear and the surgery was not successful. So I think the hardest part was possibly having so much uncertainty about whether this period of time will come to an end or whether we'll be in this loop forever. It felt like this is never going to end. It's like preparation, pre-surgery appointments, isolation at home, trying to do everything you can to keep them well, not seeing people, the actual surgery process, which was extremely heavy and also quite intimidating, and then the recovery afterwards and all the appointments to follow. Having to go through that several times with two children at the same time was quite challenging. And I think if I have to pinpoint one particularly hard thing in that process, it was probably the moment when your child woke up from the surgery, knowing that what you've just put them through unsuccessful and you have to put them through that exact same situation again. So they were so unwell. All you can think of is, I'm so sorry, but you will have to go through this again. I think that was the hardest part for me. What got me through it? I would say one particular thing comes straight into my mind, and that would be my beautiful mother-in-law, Helen, in England. She flew here to help us out and was supporting us in such a significant way during that process. So I would say that the fact that she was able to carry some of that load was very practical help that she provided, but I will never forget that. So I'm very grateful for that because I don't know if we could have done it without her support. Another thing that really helped me was accessing some counseling. I was able to shift my mindset very slowly. I mean, the shift was very slow, took a lot of time, a lot of work. But my counselor, who I started to work with, was incredible. She gave me reassurance. She made me see what was important, and I was able to change my own expectations and sometimes lower them quite a bit. I also learned to become more comfortable. I wouldn't say comfortable because I'm still not very comfortable with uncertainty or losing control. But in that situation where we were, I could not control what was happening. The more I tried controlling, the more things just went wrong. So I really had to learn to let go. And that is incredibly hard for me as a person. But slowly I felt like it was less painful, become familiar with the uncertainty and let go of the control than try to force things to go the wanted way. So I would say those were probably my biggest things to get me and us through those challenging times. Next question I asked from my guest is, what is the most precious memory on this journey? And when I was thinking how I would going to respond to this question, I wrote a lot of things down, and it was actually surprisingly hard. I think it's because you can see where you are at the moment, and all you can kind of think is examples that are happening at this very present moment. So it was hard to remember things from the past. I think also because of the challenges that we faced, like I said before, it also sort of blends in, and there is almost things that I feel that I've blocked out, or I just feel that I'm incapable to remember. But few things that I really find special during this journey. Communication is and has been really challenging with my girls. We are learning Auslan. So Auslan stands for Australian Sign Language. We are using gestures, signs, words, combination of everything to make myself understood and to understand the girls. From quite early stages onwards, I noticed that my girls respond well to pictures, and I started creating lots of social stories. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with social stories, but basically they are like a very individualized story that explains something that is otherwise very complicated to understand. So, for example, we did a trip when my girls were 1 and 2. I took them to Finland to see my family. And it was very hard to explain to my 2-year-old what's going to happen. So instead of trying to explain that by using words, I explained the journey by using pictures. And it was very powerful. She could expect some of the things that were going to happen, and that significantly reduced the anxiety. The other example when social story was very powerful for my girls was when my older, nearly 5-year-old, had her second cochlear implant, because different ears were done on different times for her. And at the time of her second cochlear implant, she was 3 years old. She couldn't quite remember the first time around, and she already understood quite well how the world works, but explaining something so complex was very hard. So I once again used social story, used visuals to explain what's going to happen. I took real pictures in the hospital. I used pictures from the past where it showed what's going to happen. And that was very powerful. She was able to retell the story by just looking at the pictures, and the surgery experience was very successful. So I feel like most powerful and memorable moments have been moments like that, when I've been able to explain something very difficult for my girls in a way that they can understand and comprehend it. Another thing I want to mention is having 2 deaf children very close in age. My girls are only 14 months apart, and they have very special relationship, and that has been from the start. From very, very early on, the older one was fixing the younger daughter's cochlear implants. Cochlear implant has a magnet that attaches to the skull, and if that comes off, you kind of have to manually put it back. And my older daughter started doing it for my younger one. The way my girls play together is quite special. So because they have some language, but still very limited language skills, they use combination of talking, gibberish and English, and gestures and signs. And some magical way, they always understand each other. It's almost like incredible to watch, because for other people, it wouldn't make sense at all. But they seem to have such a special connection that they can understand each other just from the smallest gesture or sign. And it's so adorable to see them two signing to each other. It feels quite special that even if the rest of the world can't quite understand them, they can understand each other. And I really hope that that special relationship will continue as they grow older. Another meaningful memory or perspective from our journey is probably cochlear implants. So choosing cochlear implants for your deaf child is a very challenging decision. It's not something that you do with light reasons. And it's also something that is not suitable for everyone, and it's not the choice that every family would make. For me and my husband, it took a lot of processing, and it was still very challenging for us to decide what would be the right thing to do. When the surgery process was so difficult for us and took so many attempts and a lot of challenging time, we questioned that decision a little bit. So it felt like maybe this is a sign that we've done the wrong decision for our children in terms of getting cochlear implants for them. And I think as the journey has progressed, it's been just very wonderful to see the joy that both girls get out of their cochlear implants, the fact that they can access the hearing world. For them, listening to music, singing along the music, it always makes my heart sing as well. So seeing them enjoying access to the hearing world has reassured me that we've done the right decision for our girls. And I think that's quite precious memory in realization for myself, because I carried such a heavy amount of guilt during that process. However, I do want to point out that although I'm talking about cochlear implants and access to the hearing world, we have made it such a priority for our girls to also access the deaf community and access Auslan. So we feel like eventually they will be able to make the decision themselves of what they lean towards more. But having access to both is equally as important to us. Last question that I ask my guests is around what has been the most valuable lesson during the journey. And now I'll try to answer that myself as best as I can. I think it's around mindset and how that shifted. So I mentioned earlier that I started to work with my counselor, and we started to look at expectations and how you can lower your own expectations to make the reality more realistic. I had an example of I made some homemade meals. So I cooked a big patch of meals and put them in the freezer. So there was always some homemade meals available for my girls. But I felt like that was at some point all they were eating. So they were just having 4 different meals all the time. And I had a conversation with my counselor saying, I just feel such a failure because all I'm providing is, 4 different meals and they're not being exposed to several different foods. And she just, in the most respectful way, she said to me, but they are getting home cooked meals every day. Like, it was just a huge realization for me that it's okay that that's what's happening and they're still being, looked after. Ever since then, I feel like there's been little shifts like that where I'm like, well, is this actually helping me to, maintain my mental health? There's also that reality that we look and what our strengths at the moment are and what the focus is. Like if there's lots of appointments or surgery coming up or something like that, then we have to adjust the expectations according to the energy levels and strength and resources we have at that moment. And that's been huge progress and huge work behind that. And I am so grateful for my beautiful counselor who probably is listening as well. So thank you. I think, as I mentioned before, just becoming more familiar or more comfortable with the unknown has been a big lesson for me, that I can't control everything. And sometimes trying to control things will just make things harder. So having that mindset of a bit more flexibility and trust, like I found this inner trust that you don't need to force things, that things will go just as planned and I can just trust the process. That's probably been a huge lesson for me to learn. And I wasn't very good at it, but I feel like I'm becoming better. One more huge learning that I can think of is that it is okay to ask for help. I don't know if you feel the same way, but it can sometimes feel incredibly hard to ask for some help. And we're all different. We come from different situations, different backgrounds. Some of us have a lot of help around us. Some of us have less help around us. But sometimes it's not so much even about the fact how many people you have around you to help. It's more that inner mindset that you feel like you should be able to cope by yourself. And you consider that maybe even as a weakness, which I did for sure, to reach out to people and ask for help. And definitely throughout the years, as a parent for children with additional needs, I've had to relearn to think that it's definitely not weakness, it's strength. And similar to self-care, it's essential that I ask for help, that I don't have to survive by myself. We're incredibly lucky to have a great support network around us, although our families are further away, but I'm so grateful for that. So I would say if I've learned anything, it's that it's okay to ask for help. So as a summary, I would say 3 things that I've learned during this journey as parent to children with additional needs. Number 1 would be lower your own expectations and try to match them with the reality around you. So our expectations can look different on different day, different period of time, just depends what's happening in the reality for you, and be brave to lower those expectations. Second one is try to become comfortable with the unknown, uncertainty, as well as you can. Try to let go of the urge to control things and just try to trust the process as well as you can. I know this is incredibly hard. It took me so long to even get close to get comfortable with that, and I acknowledge it. So it's not something you can change overnight, but just I would say when you start finding that peace with the uncertainty and unknown, it will be life-changing for you. And third one, make sure you reach out, you ask some help when you need that. It's a sign of a strength, not weakness. This brings us to the end of the episode. I managed to respond to the questions that I asked my guests, and it wasn't easy, I can tell you. It was actually surprisingly challenging, but hopefully it will give me some perspective when I'm having these conversations with my special guests. I hope you enjoyed listening. Thank you so much for joining me. If you feel like you know someone who would really love hearing this episode, please feel free to share on your social media. Send me any questions, any feedback. I would love hearing from you guys, and I can't wait to see you all back next time.